Hi everyone, and welcome to the Space to Feel podcast. We have a really special episode. I'm joined by Nadia today, who is the Somatic Experiencing Practitioner.
Yeah.
And so today's episode is going to be quite a delicate one. We're going to be talking about trauma in different ways. So yeah, maybe a warning for anyone listening, just to take it easy, take care of yourself. We're going to be taking care of ourselves here as well during our conversation. And yeah, I'm really excited to learn more about what you do. And, trauma is such a difficult thing that so many people struggle with. And I think when you're in the pit of it, it's hard to see a way out. So it's really nice, to have such a variety of options for dealing with it and looking at it. And yeah, I'm really excited that you're here. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, it's lovely to be here.
Great. So could you tell us a bit more, maybe an overview of what somatic experiencing is, and then we'll go into how you got into it and what your background in this is.
Yeah, so somatic experiencing, it's a completely different approach to talking therapies. So it's more or less a body-based approach to healing trauma. So dealing with the symptoms of trauma that we feel in the body and helping to release them in a titrated and gentle way. So that's the key with the nervous system. So, for example, there might be symptoms of fight, flight energy in the body. We can feel it because there might be a sense of wanting to leave the room. We might feel quite hypervigilant, sometimes always looking for threat, always feeling on edge, and we're not really sure why we feel that way. So usually what happens when we've been through a traumatic event and we've not been able to, let's say, complete the process of a fight, flight, freeze, or even a fawn response, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, that symptom of wanting to run away, of wanting to fight, or wanting to shut down can just stay in the nervous system. And so we're always kind of responding to that place in our adult life. So with somatic experiencing, what we're doing very gently, first of all, is building resource in the nervous system to build more window tolerance, to then be alongside the difficulty, but working with the edges of that to begin with in a slow, titrated way. So titrated, what I mean by that is working with a tiny piece of it and allowing ourselves to feel into that difficulty with having resource alongside it, so a sense of feeling okay to hold this. So there's certain practices that we do with that in session, and obviously I could give you a little example of that later on, a bit of a grounding practice maybe towards the end of the podcast. However, we do that because if we were to focus on the main event that's happened for that client to begin with, so let's say the big trauma, or it could even be a little trauma, something that's chronic that's just happened over the time and it's just overwhelming that client's nervous system, that would just flood the whole nervous system and re-traumatise it again and again.
Yeah.
So it's like we're remaining stuck in this loop system. So what we're looking to do is work with the edge of whatever's happened and allowing the nervous system to catch up with, we can hold this right now. We can lean into it, be curious about it. And then we might work with another piece of that. So it's working with all of the edges, not the first thing to begin with. So, for example, talking therapy, in terms of how it's different to somatic experiencing, is that we might talk about what's happened to us, which can be really helpful if it's new information and we've not shared that before with a therapist. But if we're talking about the same event again and again and again, that response is remaining stuck in the nervous system. So, for example, if it was a traumatic event that involved abuse and we might have felt helpless and there's a sense of lack of agency, not feeling alive to life, not feeling very present to life. So within us is like an incomplete fight response. And so in somatic experiencing, we would look to explore that. But first of all, building up the resource in a client's nervous system to then be able to hold that and work with it. But like I say, just the edges of it. And there's many tools that we use in somatic experiencing, and it all depends on what presents in session, moment by moment. So I won't go into the ins and outs of that.
Yeah,
obviously that's something
there's
to
a lot
explore if you're
there, isn't
interested.
it? Yeah, and I find it fascinating, and we'll go into your backstory after this because I think that'd be really interesting. But I find that this is such a fascinating concept of looking at trauma based on the nervous system, which I think so often gets overlooked. But there's something so common with people who have experienced trauma that it's almost too scary to ever look at it.
Yeah.
And, I think distraction is such a big part of our society. That's why there's a big drinking problem in our culture, and TV, and so many poisons that we want to numb ourselves with when we've been through something difficult. So I imagine it could be quite scary to hear that, and whilst it seems like there's a lot of care and support and gentleness to guide through, but what would you say to someone who is maybe still too scared to even think about looking at their trauma? What is that part of the journey? So before someone would book on to speak with you, what are those first steps like?
Well, for me, I think personally, even on my own journey, is just being curious about the symptoms that you're experiencing and how it's impacting your life. And I think it's all to do with that person at the end of the day. We can't rescue, we can't fix a person. They have to be in that place where they're willing to get that support, really. And for me, that's the most compassionate response. What we can do is maybe just show that there is help out there, and this is where you can get that help, and this is what it looks like. Again, it's like planting seeds of curiosity, but it's all down to that individual, in terms of whether they take that path. So I did mention a little bit about somatic experiencing and what that looks like before. And this work was informed by the work of Peter Levine. So he carried out research in terms of looking at animals in the wild and how they respond to threat, and what we would call a traumatic response. So in terms of animals and just observing them in the wild, Peter Levine noticed that they just have this innate ability to be able to process a fight, flight, freeze response, etc. in that present moment. So straight after the threat has happened, and then come back to a place of regulation and safety. Whereas us human beings, for example, we find it very difficult to do that. We kind of remain stuck in this loop. Yeah. But we do have this ability within us, and sometimes we forget that we've got that ability within us to be able to release this fight, flight, freeze response, which is an amazing survival mechanism that we have. And you mentioned there about, maybe a person that's really struggling with addiction, etc. Maybe there's a lot of numbing in their life because it's too overwhelming to face it. I would say that's completely normal as well at the same time. For example, it's great that our body can go into these survival states when it needs to help us get by in life. But when it gets to a point where it's problematic and it's persistent, and there's a sense of, actually, I'd like to explore living a different way. And is that a possibility? When somebody gets to that point, I feel like that's when it's an option. Yeah. But at the same time, what I would just say here is understanding that it is amazing, though, that we can do that to help us get through what we needed to get through at that point in our lives. And unfortunately, that response has remained stuck in the nervous system to the point where we might still be behaving in that way today. But there is a way to come out of that, in a gentle, slow, titrated way, like I said, to bring more agency to life, and more aliveness.
It's so nice what you're saying about bringing recognition that whatever coping mechanism someone has going on is a form of self-love in a way, and to actually attack that and add to everything that is hurting you, because we can be really harsh with ourselves. And I heard something recently which really stuck out to me. It was this girl, and she was saying, if you want to start loving yourself, if you want to, you already do. Yeah. And I thought that was beautiful, and it related to what you were saying around just like the healing process, it really starts before you even done any work, but it's the being curious and open to looking at it and giving kindness to yourself.
Yeah, exactly, definitely. And knowing that what you've done for so long is just a protective mechanism, a survival instinct in the body, which is amazing that we've got that, because that means that whenever we need it, it is there. But like I said, when we notice that maybe it's causing an issue with everyday life, then just dropping in that question. Is there something else here that I could do to support me to come out of that? And
and this is
and
beautiful.
then at that point, looking for that resource, really, whatever that looks like for you. And sometimes talking therapies can be really helpful to begin with, because then it gives us awareness of what our patterns are and where they're coming from, where they stem from, maybe in our childhood or shock traumas that we've been through in life. But then somatically in the body, if the body's still responding in a certain way again and again and again, that's where somatic experiencing can really support you with better regulation and more window of tolerance.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you're saying about sort of the talking therapy compared to somatic. And for me, I think one of the key differences, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on it, is like I'm a big believer in talking therapy, and I'm studying to become a psychotherapist, so it's a really big part of how I see healing process for me, and for some people I think it can be a really good tool. But I think people, and including myself, can fall in the trap of over analysing our feelings and not feeling our feelings. And that feels related to what you're saying about being in the body as opposed to just talking about it. And I think there's a beautiful way of talking about things where they're not just words, but you're allowing the feeling to come through you. But sometimes that's too scary to do, so you'll just stay in the analysing phase of what happened and the story and the narrative. But how did we go into your background? Because it's so fascinating, this method that you use and your approach to healing. And I just love, if you're willing, to just say maybe how you found this path and why this path over another one. Yeah,
it's been a journey, to be honest. I mean, personally, I've been through my own developmental trauma and shock traumas in my life. And so I was always on a journey of, what is there out there that can help support me be more alive to life, be more present to life. Because I always felt quite overstimulated and overwhelmed by life in general due to certain events that have happened that have been quite tragic, and really shock to the system. And so my journey was understanding my own mental health and trying out different therapies along the way. So personally, in the past, I had a lot of talking therapies, and that was over a 20-year period, actually. And it did help me in terms of creating more understanding, like, this is why I feel this way. This is why this is happening in life. And here's some tools that could support me moment by moment. However, I was still feeling the same in my nervous system when I would show up to, say, social events or just being in front of people, being seen, being witnessed. And that was very developmental. But I didn't know that back then. And so my journey was having 20 years worth of therapies and being curious along the way, noticing that I still actually felt the same. I was still reacting in a certain way to difficult events that were actually quite harmful towards myself. And so I decided to keep pursuing this quest to find the right therapy out there that would support me. And of course, there is no one right therapy because, it's all helpful. Like I said, it brings a lot of awareness. It gives you different tools. But in the end, I had compassion-focused therapy. So this was like the doorway into trauma work. And so just to say a little bit more about that, with compassion-focused therapy, that's Paul Gilbert's work. And at the time, I was seeing a psychologist, and I'd never heard of this before. But instead of it being a cognitive therapy, it was more heart-centered. So I started to feel for myself for the first time in my life.
Wow.
That sense of, it's not my fault what happened to me in life. And it's not their fault too. So being able to see people as human beings with their conditioning and why they might show up in a certain way and how it might impact me. Awareness of boundaries. Okay, I understand why they've done that. It's not their fault, but it isn't right at the same time. You know, that felt really empowering for me, and to the point where I stopped being harmful towards myself after a long period of time. And after that, I got to recovery. And then I was so curious. I thought, I want to know more about compassion. So where does this come from? It's helped me so much. I want to really embody this. And that led me into Buddhism. And so from there, I then saw a poster to train as a mindfulness teacher with Breathworks, which is a compassion-based mindfulness organisation, charity-based, and it's trauma-sensitive as well. So I trained with them for a few years, became a mindfulness teacher, loved that. Again, it was like this doorway into a lot more awareness of the sensory aspects of the body, so not just the cognitive from the other talking therapies in the past. I started to feel the body and how it was responding. I started to notice patterns in the body. Like, for example, if my heart was hurting again and again and again in a certain scenario, or that gut feeling in the stomach, that visceral feeling, being curious about what is that, where's that coming from? And then going on retreats, as you do as a mindfulness teacher and in the Buddhist world. And there was a teacher there that was leading the retreat who is a somatic experiencing practitioner, and he was incorporating nervous system regulation tools into the retreat, which I'd never witnessed before, never seen. Made the retreat trauma sensitive as well, which again is something that I'd never witnessed. And I was just fascinated by that, and I thought, this is amazing. This is something that I would love to go away and study and learn more about. So it was like a seed was planted. And then I went away, studied for 3 years, became a somatic experiencing practitioner. And that has just been invaluable. So for me, having many talking therapies personally in the past, and then this body-based approach, so allowing the body to speak, it's a bottom-up approach, you know, tracking the physiology in a client's body, like I mentioned before, helping us complete incomplete fight-flight responses. But sometimes we're not even aware that that is in us, that we're kind of reacting from that place because we haven't got a relationship with the body. So again, it was like building this relationship, learning about the body a bit more so. And from there, I've carried on, and now I'm studying pre-verbal and developmental trauma, which is Dr. Aileen Lapierre's work. So that's going way back to when we're in our mother's womb, you know, trauma that could happen there, misattunement with the primary caregiver when we're a child, the rupture that can cause, that relational aspect, and how that impacts us in our adult life when we're choosing relationships, etc.
That's so interesting.
So it's fascinating work, and it's like a psychobiological approach and somatic psychotherapy. So interweaved, and it's connecting the body and mind and supporting us with these emotional deficits that we have from such a young age, but then they carry out into our adult life. And then, sometimes we're not aware of that. You know, sometimes we might find ourselves in a relationship and we're wondering, why am I in this relationship? Why am I feeling this way? Why do I feel quite anxious, avoidant, etc.? But getting curious about that through touch. So it's neuroaffective touch work. So again, there's a bit of a taboo with touch because obviously, you know, there's consent issues there, etc. Although, you know, it's so powerful because touch is our first language, you know, when we come into the world before the brain has even developed. So that's our imprint, pre-verbal and developmentally. And so it's so fascinating to learn about and already have a felt experience of it, because obviously I have to have my own sessions as I'm training to do this. how we can release certain responses in the body from such a young age that we don't even have any words for. And when we stay with that through touch, we can actually make meaning of it and actually verbalise what we wanted to say that we wasn't able to say at that point, just through the body responding in certain ways and being able to understand that. Yeah, it's fascinating work. So here I am today, and yeah, I do volunteer work as well at the Great Manchester Mental Health Trust. I've co-created courses there.
Wow.
I'm just passionate, you know, so there's volunteer work, it's a career in trauma therapy as well. It's holistic,
incredible.
It's a spiritual path, it's, many aspects really.
It's amazing how, I guess with anyone, you can think your life is going to take a certain path, but then like, I guess things happen and you've turned, you know, a painful past into a really, in a way, creative way, and definitely a helpful way to help so many people through what you do. And it's just an amazing and really brave thing to not only not distract yourself from your pain, but to turn it into something beautiful and something which is so heart-centered and so empathic. And I don't know if you have insight into why you've always had this curiosity or this, you know, strength to look at things.
Yeah, everybody's always curious about this with me. You know, anybody that knows me that close. Well, yeah, I always wanted to know what happens when you don't give up. Wow. That's a mantra of mine. What happens when you don't give up? So, yeah, for example, growing up, unfortunately, I lost my brother and father to suicide. And yeah, that was horrific. That was, two big shock traumas there. And so to really experience that, and also kind of the belief that then is mirrored back to me, you know, this sense of life is too tough. And the only way is to not be here anymore. To see that message, obviously not being verbally said to me, but being shown to me from such a young age, was very difficult. And so there was two ways of dealing with that, either being paralysed by the grief and the difficulty, and just, I suppose, just seeing that as a path, or seeing that there's another path and being curious about it, but maybe it's a path that nobody knows about. And so I got curious about that path. And like I said, every day there was always this sense of, what happens when I don't give up, and always curious about the different help out there. And that's when I started asking for help myself, noticing that I've been through difficult events in life, but I was the person that asked for that help. Nobody signposted me. Nobody told me, you know, about certain help out there. It all came from me and my heart, because I knew that I was struggling, and that the way I was reacting was quite harmful towards myself in terms of my coping mechanisms. So to turn that round and actually take agency, find that from deep within, that I want to know, what can life look like if I get the right support and the right resource and the right tools? And that's where talking therapy, and it's all about trial and error as well, because each therapist is completely different. It all depends on your relationship with them. So you might see a therapist that, is very well experienced, but then if you sit in session with them and you don't feel that comfortable, then it's not going to work, to be honest. So that happened with me a few times. I would walk into an office, see a therapist, and then I'd get a vibe that actually I can't connect with this person. So then I go away, start again, and that was so tiring. But then eventually, like I said, you know, having a therapy that was quite powerful, that compassionate-based approach, and then being curious about that, because it had such a profound impact. There was something about, if I can do this with everything that I've been through in life, you know, I'm sure that this could help others as well. So then kind of this gift of turning something so painful into something really beautiful this life experience, and just wanted to share that as a gift in many different ways. So as my career, as a volunteer, in friendships.
That's beautiful. And I think there is such a powerful thing when you're feeling so low and helpless and hopeless about the world to have the right conditions and take action, as you say, and see that there are so many different approaches. You know, I've heard of people who've tried talking therapy, and maybe they only tried one person or two, and they rule it out. Like, no, that doesn't work. And now I've tried helping myself, it doesn't work, so now I'm going to stick to drinking, or, I mean, maybe that's a bad example. But it seems like, obviously, you know, your experience with talking therapy went on for quite a while, even though it wasn't quite right. But then something changed with the compassion. I felt like, it was like an uplifting energy as you were talking about that breakthrough of feeling compassion for yourself and for others. And I wonder what your insight is into what's under, like, what is that compassion? And if people haven't felt that before who are listening, how could you translate that beauty?
How could you translate that beauty? What a question. It's a heart response. It's like the heart's wish to look after self and understand others, and not a black and white world, you know, where there's a lot more periphery, a lot more perspective. And for me, it also was a massive weight off my shoulder to then have this sense of understanding my own conditioning and other people's, so my family's, my friendships, other people in life, not just seeing somebody as an object in front of me, getting curious about their life story and what they've been through and what makes them show up the way they might show up. You know, kind of diffusing that personal aspect sometimes, which was quite a common theme for me growing up due to all the difficulties that I've been through. I was quite sensitive. And then to actually feel for self for the first time and allowing myself to grieve as well. So instead of being strong and defensive, which was an amazing coping mechanism because obviously it got me through all the difficulties in life. So that's what I meant before when we were talking about, you know, maybe a member of the public being curious about trauma and how would they, you know, find that support? How would they start reaching out for that support? You know, what are the symptoms to look out for? Well, it is a personal journey, and I feel like it does have to come from within, from yourself. That sense of enough is enough. I want to know what happens when I don't give up. I want to feel more present to life. What can that feel like? Is there a way to understand that in life? You know, maybe it might be a bit of a journey of trial and error with different therapies, but can that be okay? Just knowing that I'm here and I'm trying to work through it with an honest, authentic heart. And just feeling that compassion for self just really helped me with my relationships as well, in terms of building bridges, for example, with my own family and, the way I perceive them, creating boundaries as well, you know, and, just trying to show up in a healthy way, although authentic at the same time, and knowing that I can do that now without having this big wall up. Of this defensive survival mechanism, this fight response.
But bringing the warmth and the softness from a heart-centered approach.
And knowing that that's okay and I'm not going to be flooded by it. But then that was the doorway in, the compassion-focused therapy, and then later on, you know, having somatic experiencing myself, just noticing like incomplete fight responses, flight responses from difficulty that I've been through in the past as well. And knowing that there is a way to work with this and express it in a healthy way. So even though I wasn't able to back then, because this is what I help a client with as well, it's knowing that we can do that now and feel into that and allowing the body to express itself. So the body wants to express itself, but it wasn't able to. So we allow that in session.
That's really interesting.
That's the place that we get to, you know, eventually.
I'm fascinated that you're saying the body wants to express itself. And you've talked a bit about, obviously, the research coming from studying animals. And I'm really curious if you could kind of let me into your view of like, do you feel like the body is its own entity? And if there is an us and our body, is that how you see like the entity of being a human, that there are these two different parts of us? Or how are they linked? Like they want to speak to each other, but it seems like our mind, which, you know, kind of leads our life, and, you know, we talk through our mind, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with that. But then you've got something else communicating with us. What is that relationship?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like that bottom-up approach. Working with the body is connected to mind as well, but sometimes mind and body feels disconnected, and it feels like one might be running the show compared to the other. And so that's something that I check in terms of working with clients, this mind-body dialogue. How does mind, how does body feel right now? Are they in harmony with one another? So this is neuroaffective touch language now, from Dr. Aileen Lepierre's work. So this sense of feeling into body and mind. Do they feel at peace with one another? Have they fell out? And what would mind need to feel more trusting of body, and vice versa? And these are things that we explore. So to answer your question, no, I don't see it as a separate, but sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect due to survival energy in the body.
Fascinating.
And in mind as well, depending on how we overanalyze certain events again and again. You know, we might be telling the body a story that might not be true right now, and vice versa. The body might be telling the mind a story, like there's a threat right now, but there isn't a threat. And so we have to get both on board to be able to be more alive and present to life.
And it's incredible, this like fear or this threat of danger, how I guess societally we think we're, you know, so far evolved from animals, and we know there's no lion around the corner, and sort of emails can be just as big of a trigger on the nervous system as a lion would have been. And it's so fascinating how, you know, historic our body is and our evolution, and how we've evolved way too quickly with technology and society. But from what you're explaining, and I'm hearing from your approach to dealing with trauma, it's really taking care with not our animal selves, but just an acceptance and bringing on board of really deep and historic parts of us that need to be dealt with in a certain way, rather than, I guess I'm just thinking like, you know, a lot of people who have dealt with a lot of trauma and have suppressed it, and they're not in touch with their body, so they might not even register anxiety, or they might not like just fully to the side as if it's not part of their experience. So what would a symptom be? Like, could you give us a little example of, you know, someone says, you know, I'm fine, like there's nothing going on, but that might be like a symptom that they experience. Do you come across that? And if so, what would they be?
So it's interesting because, as I said before, you know, each client is so different and their nervous systems are so unique. But a symptom might be an anxious feeling in the stomach, like a fluttering kind of sensation. But we might dismiss it. We might just think, oh yeah, just a bit of a sensation in the stomach. Or it could be a brace, like a sense of fight energy. So we might be hunched up in the shoulders. There might be tension there in the back area. But we might be completely unaware of that, though, if we haven't got a relationship with the body.
Like a tense jaw and things like that. Is that similar?
All of these different things, really. But what we would do in somatic experiencing, again, is work with the edges of that. So say if somebody felt dissociated, for example, from their body, they felt numb from it. So they can't even feel that sensation of anxiety in the stomach. So yeah, we would know that that might be a sensation, or the heart palpitations. But if you're not connected to your body, you might not even sense that. So we would get curious about what happens before the person goes away. Yeah, what happens there. And also, if we notice that that happens in session, in terms of my approach and what I've been trained in, so of course I'm not a trainer, I've just trained in it as a practitioner, would be bringing the client back into the the present moment with certain grounding techniques, and to help them come back into the body, you know, if I'm noticing that that's happening, because sometimes it can happen in session as well, when a client starts to feel too overwhelmed, there's too much sympathetic nervous system activation and the body goes into shutdown. So we call that a dorsal vagal freeze. So again, it's been really gentle. It's like lifting the brake and just allowing a little bit of it to be seen and witnessed in a way that the client can tolerate that. So that's why we never go to the main event to begin with, because that can flood the whole nervous system and bring us into a sense of shutdown or overwhelm.
And is that shutdown the same as like a disassociation?
Yeah, like a numb state. So a bit floaty, a bit spacey. I'm here, but I'm not here. Kind of like a functional freeze as well in life. So when we've been through a difficult event and maybe we had to just shut down because it was too overwhelming, but we're still going through the motions in life, still getting up to work, maybe, you know, making food, having a shower, etc., but we're not actually present. We would call that a functional freeze. So it's like you're still able to mobilise, but you're not actually fully present.
Right.
But again, with compassion, we can understand why we're in that state when we start working with it, because of course we did what we had to do at that moment in time. And it's amazing that we can do that. But now there is another option. So when we notice that it's a problem in life, that's when we can get curious and start to see what support there is out there. And so, yeah, it's a body-based approach to healing trauma, but at the same time, it connects with mind. When we start working with the physiology, reconfiguring it, more meaning comes to life. So it's this sense of, aha, I understand why this happened now. I understand that I wanted to do this and I wasn't able to do this. I understand that I wanted to say this, but I wasn't able to say that. It's like the jigsaw puzzle pieces start coming together bit by just working with the edges. You know, it's our job not to put those puzzle pieces together. You know, that's the client's experience, and we're just holding a container and helping them to support working through that in a non-judgmental, compassionate way.
Yeah.
And with, you know, some tools that we've got really that can support them.
That's amazing. It's so interesting, like seeing it that way, and the approach to it seems, I mean, I can see like why you've gone down this path, because it seems to make sense, you know, and working with, you know, the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic system, and it's amazing to be able to mix science with also something that's really complex and kind of like intangible as well when you're dealing with complex experiences and feelings. And I'm curious as well, obviously there seems to be quite a link with Buddhism as well. And you said that was part of your path.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And that's very compassion focused. So obviously I know like a lot of people like don't turn to religion or like philosophy in the way that Buddhism is. But what sort of, it seems like you're very passionate about self-awareness and everything you've been describing. It's a beautiful manifestation of self-awareness of, I wanted to say this and I didn't, so this happened. And that's been my experience with Buddhism as well. It's just developing compassion and self-awareness. So I'm curious what role that has played, or what skillfulness you have taken from your experience with it.
So with Buddhism, I feel like the ethics approach has been really key for me in terms of integrating that, you know, somatically in the body. So noticing when there's like push and pull aspects and being able to sit with that from a place of compassion and understanding my conditioning, for example, from my past, which might make me a bit of a rescuer or a caretaker because I had to do that at such a young age. So having that in my awareness and noticing maybe in communication, you know, with friends, with family members, partner, etc. How am I showing up right now? And is it actually healthy? And where's that coming from? What's the intention behind that? And it's helped me really reflect on those aspects, Buddhism, but from a place of compassion and, yeah, of course, the mindfulness approach and the different practices that we do within that. So there's a practice called metta bhavana, and that is loving kindness towards self and a friend, somebody that's neutral. somebody that we're having a bit of difficulty with, a tiny little bit of difficulty, nothing too activating. And then seeing if we can extend it out, to people around us in the world. And that practice for me has been profound. So it's so simple, but actually when we do this on a regular basis, so as you've heard, my journey into Buddhism as well was having compassion focused therapy, because they were the seeds, and the fruits of that were just really profound. And so to embody that more so, this sense of compassion for self by understanding conditioning, but understanding as well that there is a way to come out of that, to untie those knots, and also seeing other beings as a whole and not just an object, like I mentioned before. That's where that practice has really, really supported me in the spiritual life, really showing up in an embodied, ethical, skillful way, and noticing actually, like I mentioned before, when I might start to feel like I'm going off course, maybe where unskillful action is starting to arise from my past conditioning. So maybe taking up space, being a bit of a rescuer, and actually what's it like to yield back, to feel my back on the chair and to allow space and trust that other person can support themselves and find their own way, and I can just be alongside them.
That's such an important lesson that I think I resonate as well with, having been a rescuer. Sort of saviour complex. I think I used to have to be in a position where I had to help people from a young age, but also getting upon doing my own therapy and like exploring that, this sense of being needed felt really good, because then people can't abandon you if you're useful to them.
That's interesting that you've just shared that.
So so that's been an interesting thing along my journey that I've been working on. And I remember, I think it was maybe my therapist at the time told me, it's when I started studying counselling, they said that it's actually incredibly disempowering to save someone. Especially when they don't really need saving. But to say to someone, you can't figure it out on your own, you need me, let me save you.
Exactly.
When it's disempowering. So I think through that I learned to allow space and to take the pressure off my shoulders to swoop in and save the day. Because people are okay. And I know for me, my hardest lessons have been when I had to figure it out myself. And I wouldn't want to take that away from someone.
Exactly. Allowing them to explore their own emotions. And everybody has their own time in life, and the body has its own time, to feel through that and express it. But again, I can really resonate with what you've just shared there, because, growing up I was a caretaker, more or less, and a bit of a rescuer due to certain family dynamics. And to come out of that now, but notice that it does happen now and again, like the body wants to go forward, just noticing that somatically, and actually, Nadia, can you yield back now? Just feel, the back, off the spine, on the chair, and just allowing that regulation to happen and just allowing space. And from what you've just shared there as well, I feel like that's such an important point about it being disempowering that you've just shared, because for me personally, it's not compassionate, to be that for somebody unless they've asked me for support, for help. If they've not asked me, then for me to jump into their space and try and rescue them from feeling their difficulty, it's not going to support them long term. It's like short term, it's like putting a plaster over it. But actually the crack, it'll just start appearing again and again and again. That's something that actually really helped me in the past, many, many years ago, when I was really suffering with my mental health and was on this journey of healing and getting to recovery. At one point I saw a professional, and he said to me, because I was so impatient, I just wanted to know, like, what can help me right now and cure me, because I'm fed up with feeling this way. And sometimes that can happen, we get fed up, we just want to get better straight away. And so this professional just shared this visual with me of what would happen now, Nadia, if a crack appeared on the wall. So I said, I don't know, probably replaster it. Okay, well, what if the crack comes back again? What would you think then, Nadia? Well, probably just replaster it again. But what if it keeps coming back, Nadia? Well, the foundations probably need to be rebuilt on the building. And he was like, exactly. And that's what we need to do with you. So more or less, just be patient, trust the journey. And I think sometimes we're so eager, and especially when we've been feeling a certain way for such a long period of time. And also we've been witnessing somebody feeling that way for a long period of time. That's where the rescuer might come in, where we're like, oh, we know, what kind of support has helped us. So maybe we can just throw that on them and that might help them, but it might not. They have to be ready for that. And we can't really influence. Like I say, all we can do is be alongside. But again, it is a compassionate response to yield, to lean back. And you mentioned about this developmental aspect and abandonment, and sometimes that's why we go forth and we're a bit of a rescuer, because also we might be scared that if we don't, then that person might not be there anymore and they might not like us and we're not seen and we're not heard, etc. And a lot of that can come back to our pre-verbal and developmental state when there's been a sense of misattunement. And sometimes when we do this inner work, we can understand that. And it's a sense of, I don't need to do that now because that's not happening. But I understand, and bringing this compassion towards self. I understand why you want to do that. That's what you used to do, but you don't need to do that now. This is a different dynamic. Can I trust that this situation will be different? But also bringing more healing to that younger part by trying to hold it like a newborn,
I love inner child work.
Yeah.
Bringing empathy. I do a lot of that in my own sort of spiritual and therapeutic journey of when I see myself triggered, it's hard to come out of the trigger sometimes, but it's okay to sit in it with that self-awareness and to, I don't know if it's part of your practice, but part of my practice is to see I'm triggered and say, okay, I'm an adult, I'm not in danger right now. And who is feeling the danger? Oh, it's my 6-year-old self. And I just visualize her and I give her a hug. Immediately feel better. And I say, what do you need? What's going on? And I just listen to her 6-year-old babble. And I empathize with her. And for me, that's something that's really resonated. Because I was a caregiver at a young age from my younger sister being born when I was 9. So I really stepped in, and I've always had that sort of young child that I was looking after. So it's a really soft spot and a lovely thing to turn back to when I can do that for myself. There's something really beautiful about that. And I know we've done obviously a lot of talking, which is nice, but I like when you said about feeling your spine on the chair and grounding through that. So I'm wondering, maybe as we're reaching sort of the end of our chat, I mean, obviously we can talk about anything else we want to if anything is springing up, but I think it would be nice when we feel like it's the right time to do a little meditation if you're willing to
get out of mind and come back into body.
To invite body in. I'm so inspired by what you're saying about being in tune with the body. And I know with things like eating disorders or going just to food for comfort, that we're not in tune with the body and it's just mind ruling over, I want to feel better, what can make me feel better right now? Or even burnout and being so tired from work. And not being in tune with your body and how it's feeling and what's going on. So I'm really inspired by your work and what you do, that is such an important and central aspect of the healing journey that I think is just overlooked too often.
Well, I'd be more than happy to do a little practice right now. And of course, this is something that I would do with clients anyway, in terms of, when we think about a structure of somatic experiencing session, the first part of it is resourcing, so bringing practices like this in.
Okay.
So obviously we'll have a short snippet today. And then it's working with a bit of the difficulty, and then it's coming back into resource and integration. So that's kind of a flow of a session. But let's do a bit of practice now.
Great.
Okay, so we'll make sure that we're comfortable on the chair.
And anyone at home, feel free to close your eyes and follow along as well as we go through it.
So for this practice, you might want to close your eyes, or you might just want to lower your gaze on an object in front of you. So just whatever feels right for you. And if at any moment you feel any area of discomfort that feels maybe a little bit overwhelming, it's okay to just open your eyes and have a little look around the room. And then just come back to the practice whenever it feels right for you. And coming back to an anchor, like the feet, the rise and fall of the breath in the stomach, or the support of the back of the chair. So what we're going to do to begin with is a little practice called orienting. So we're going to open our eyes very gently, and I'm just going to invite you to look around the room really, really slowly. So allowing your head and neck to move in the direction of your eyes, and noticing the colours that you can see, texture, objects, awareness of the space around you, to the side of you, up above, behind you as well. And there might be a shift in your breathing as you're doing this. You might notice an exhale, the breathing might become a bit deeper. And this is just a way of telling the body, the nervous system, that we're okay right now. So whenever we feel a bit of activation, maybe we might feel threatened when we walk into a room and we don't know why we feel that way. We might feel a bit on edge. Just coming back to this practice again and again. And so now I invite you to place your hand on your navel area. A navel area is a key part of the body. It's an energetic gateway. So as a baby, this is where we would have received our life force energy. So when we think of the cord being in our mother's womb, oxygen to help us grow and develop. And it's where our gut brain is as well. But what we're just going to notice here is the rise and fall of the breath as you're breathing in and out. That gentle expansion and subsiding. And noticing that support from the back of the chair too. So sympathetic nervous system can be found in the spine, that energy, that fight flight. So coming back to feeling that support from the back of the chair can be really helpful, really regulating for the nervous system. So just noticing that in-breath and out-breath. And noticing whether it changes, does it move, does it have a colour, a texture, this breath. And it might be as you slow down, you notice some tension releasing from the shoulders, maybe the face, the jaw. You may wish to just open your mouth gently to allow the jaw to rest. And if your mind wanders, which it will do, That's okay, because that's what our minds do. So we just gently bring ourselves back again and again. And now from this place, we're going to leave one hand on the navel area and the other hand on the heart, which is the left side here. And just noticing the pressure of the touch on the body. Does it need a bit more? And noticing how mind and body and mind respond to this touch. As you're breathing in and out. And just dropping in the question. Is mind and body and mind in harmony right now? And if not, what would mind need or what would body need to feel more connected? So again, just noticing the support from the back of the chair, contact of the feet on the floor, and the touch of your hand on the heart area and stomach. Allowing those questions to sink down into our being. And in a few moments, just bring this short practice to a close. So gently just noticing the weight of the body on the chair. Maybe just giving your feet a bit of a wriggle. And now just placing your hands over your eyes. And just blinking them a few times and allowing the light to come in slowly. And as you open your eyes, just allowing yourself to have a look around the room again now, each corner of the room, and just seeing if anything changed. Maybe something stands out that didn't before. Maybe a colour, maybe certain information. Maybe the head, the neck feels different, the eyes, maybe they feel softer. Maybe there's more periphery. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Really
You're
enjoyed
welcome.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell anyone listening if they're interested in booking a session with you, learning more? How can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me by searching for Embodied with Nadia. And also I am on Bodywise's website in Manchester. So they're based in the Northern Quarter in the Manchester Buddhist Centre. So yeah, just get in touch and it would be lovely to hear from you and have a chat.
Thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation. I think it's so rich with experience and wisdom and compassion. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And
Summer.
also a special thank you to Braxton, my lovely producer of my podcast. Really appreciate you, Braxton, too. And thank you everyone at home for listening. And we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.